There's no question that policing has changed over the years, particularly these days when our police, whether they're municipal or RCMP, have so much more on their plate. I did it was supposed to be a walkabout with the VPD a few years ago in the downtown east side overnight, and it ended up being we were never in the squad car. We were on the street all night. And I came away with a couple of very important impressions. But the most important impression was what we were asking our police to do. In another life, I considered becoming an RCMP member and went to Depot and Regina and did my due diligence to realize maybe it wasn't the right thing for me to do. But the view that I got of policing, and when I went with the members of the VPD in the downtown east side overnight, changed my view entirely. We expect these people not only to be police, we expect them to be social workers, we expect them to be healthcare workers, and it just strikes me that the public don't have an appreciation for that. And we need to better understand what we're asking the people that work for us and people who we depend on to keep us safe, what they are supposed to do. I'm very excited about our next panel, and here to introduce our second section, Policing and Public Safety in Changing Times, is our panel sponsor, Trevor Dinwoodie, Pacific Northern Region Director with the National Police Federation. Trevor?
Thanks, Jess. I'm going to mess up your mic. I'm a little taller than the average. Good morning. My name is Trevor Dinwoodie. I am the Pacific Region Director for the National Police Federation and a very proud sponsor of our second panel regarding police and public safety. The NPF is the sole certified bargaining agent that represents close to 20,000 RCMP officers across this country and nearly 7,000 here in this province. On behalf of the NPF, thank you for all being here. The NPF may be a union for RCMP members, but like our members and like you, we are committed to improving public safety for all of Canadians. That is why the NPF is continuing to push for real change across the board, like progressive bail reform. We heard a little bit about that this morning. And then a national safety public broadband network that can facilitate police officers across the country being able to deal with emergencies in real time altogether. We are pushing for changes to improve the lives of Canadians in all communities. Changes like this cannot happen in isolation. It relies on the strong collaboration of local leaders, businesses, and residents to share a commitment to safety. With this collaboration in mind, we would encourage also our political leaders to ensure that policing professionals with their real-time experience are always at the table when any changes or plans of the future are being considered. Thank you to Save Our Streets Coalition for organizing this important event and all of you for taking the time to participate. Our moderator today, does she really need an introduction?
Yes.
Is Simi Sara, host of the Simi Sara Show. Simi's popular morning show and many years in broadcasting make her the perfect person to moderate this particular session. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, Simi Sara.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Trevor. Thank you to Jess for having us here. I think everything I've heard is, I keep nodding my head. Yes, you're absolutely right. There are changes in our society and there have been changes in policing, and that makes this particular panel this morning, I think, a critical part of kind of coming to grips with the public safety issues that really are, and we hear this every day, front of mind for British Columbians and their communities. So let me get started by introducing our panelists this morning, and I'm just going to go from my left down here. We have, of course, Chief Norm Lipinski, Chief Constable of the Surrey Police Service. We have with us Dwayne McDonald, Deputy Commissioner and Commanding Officer of the RCMP in BC. And then we have Chief Adam Palmer, Chief Constable with the Vancouver Police Department. And last but not least, we have Cash Heed, former West Vancouver Police Chief, former BC Solicitor General, currently a councillor with the City of Richmond. And did we forget former VPD member in there as well? We did, yes. Got the whole resume. Okay, so let's get started. We've got a lot of important questions that we are going to hopefully get some answers to today. So I'll just start out with our first introductory question. We'll pose that to, I think, all of our panelists today. So I think we're all curious about the ways in which police forces have had to change or maybe adapt the way you are policing given what we see happening on our streets. And I'll start with Chief Lipinski here and work my way down.
Yes, thank you very much, Simi, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Very important dialogue here today. I'll start off with just a couple of comments, and we've heard snippets of this theme. First of all, as a society, how we got here today is multifactorial, and our way out of it or to mitigate, to get better, is also multifactorial. But from a policing perspective, when there is an absence of social safety nets, we are the last resort. And sometimes there's adverse outcomes, and it shouldn't be that way, but the reality is that as a police chief, I see the trend line that more and more we get involved in issues that are not mainstream policing, but because we're the only ones available at 2 in the morning, we have to deal with it. One of the comments that I'll make also has to do with youth. I think that we have to invest a lot more in our youth. The studies are very, very clear. Adverse childhood experiences are more common in violent offenders. And so I know my colleagues on the panel certainly place a lot of emphasis on youth development and so forth. And then it's about what's been referred to as a revolving door of justice. And there's a frustration among police chiefs. I'll speak to myself. Sometimes I feel that we don't have a crime problem. We have a recidivism problem. And my frontline people have to deal with that over and over again. And the last point I'll make, what I've seen changed, is that as much as we talk about metrics and that the crime rate, the violent crime rate, is slowly coming down or leveling off, that doesn't matter. Perception matters. Public trust matters. We talked about public trust in the justice system, public trust in your policing system. Perception matters. And all of us try and work on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Simi. Good morning, everybody. And I'll just build on what Norm says. I think you'll find the themes. It doesn't matter if you're a municipal police agency or the RCMP or another type of agency. We're all dealing with these same challenges, and we're all trying to adapt our service delivery model to address them. And I have the benefit of policing the majority of the province, and so we see these issues in the large urban areas, but we also see them magnified in the rural or remote areas in the province where, to Norm's point and to others, a police officer responding to a particular incident in a smaller community may be the only, quote unquote, government representative in that community. So not only they're the police officer, they're the ambulance driver, they're the social worker, they're the mental health worker, they're the paramedic, and that is a significant burden to place on any one individual. We've had to adapt training in terms of mental health and outreach, de-escalation training, medical training. So we're putting a lot of burden on our individual officers, and that, I would say, is across the board. Doesn't matter if it's rural or urban. And this isn't a criticism of those agencies that aren't present, because it's a resource challenge that we face with in many cases. So we're not able currently to put health resources or education resources or mental health resources in certain parts of our community just by cost, and they're difficult to staff. So we have to we've modified our services. As Norm mentioned, we have significant youth outreach. We have police mental health outreach teams where you pair police officers with mental health nurses. We have integrated teams. I would say in British Columbia, we're blessed in Canada to have the largest, and I would say the best functioning integrated teams, where you'll see all municipal and RCMP agencies together, whether it's homicide, whether it's IDENT, police service dogs, gangs, to jointly tackle a problem that we realize alone we cannot tackle. But what happens, I think, and I think Norm touched on it, is in our communities, when people look for the police, they want to know, am I safe? Can I trust you? And do you know what you're doing? When we have all these burdens placed on us that bring us outside the scope of typical law enforcement, those questions become challenging. And it isn't just resources, because policing anywhere, we're always concerned with governance, we're concerned with oversight, we're concerned with cost. And we've seen a lot of those challenges where resources and investment are coming down, but the burden and the requirements in society going up. And so to manage that is going to take a multifaceted, holistic approach, not just with policing, but with health and with all government agencies, really, to try and address.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Adam Palmer. I'm the Chief of Police here in Vancouver. First off, I just want to thank SOS for pulling this together, because this is such an important discussion. And when I look around the room, I think I know or have met probably 60 to 70% of you. It's a great cross-section of people from Vancouver, but around the province, and people of different political stripes, Indigenous leaders, civic leaders, business leaders, community people. It's an incredible cross-section. So what I really want to focus on today, I'm going to give you a couple of teasers here, but I want to focus on solutions. I think it's easy to talk about the problems. I think we all know what the problems are, and we can all go back and say how these problems happened, but let's work together on solutions, and I want to throw out a few tangible ones as we go. Just to give you a bit of an order of magnitude here in Vancouver, I'm a local kid, lived here my whole life, been a cop in the city for over 35 years, and I've been the police chief in Vancouver for 10 years. I know the city very well from a public safety perspective. And just to give you an idea, today VPD will receive over 1,000 calls for service. We will dispatch officers to about 700 of those. While we're sitting here today during this meeting, VPD officers will respond to about 200 calls for service. Of those 200 calls for service, 40 or 50 of them will be crimes. The remaining calls for service will be a whole bunch of other things that we'll deal with social issues, helping the fire department and the ambulance service, missing children, car accidents, a whole host of different things that we will address. But the draw on police services in the city is intense. It's full on, and I do want to give kudos to the MPF for organizing this, but also to my fellow VPD officers and the officers around BC who do an incredible job under a lot of pressure and a lot of oversight, which we need for accountability in our province. But our cops are doing a really good job on the front line, and I know everybody wants a cop when you call one right away, but the draw for police services is significant, and we have to triage just like you do in a hospital, depending on what the nature of the call is. I'm going to address one thing before I turn it over to my colleague Cash here, and that is the numbers of safety, the crime rates, things like that, and the perception of safety, and Norm touched on that. In Vancouver, the 2024 year-end stats, and of course we know there's a lot of unreported crime, show that violent crime is down 6.8%, property crime is down 9.2%, and total crime is down 7%. But we know the perception of safety, how people feel when they get out every day, when you go to work, when you go to a movie, when you're going to go shopping at Pacific Center, whatever it is. Those types of concerns of how you're feeling when you're walking down the street are of the utmost concern to us as police leaders, and we want to continue to work with all of you closely on solutions to make the problem better. And somebody said it, we got to focus on the upstream drivers, not just being reactive. We want to be proactive. So thank you for having us here today, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Simi. You've heard about the complexity and how resource intensive trying to arrest our way out of this particular problem. And I can tell you, we're not going to arrest our way out of this particular problem. It's a very convoluted set of circumstances we've gotten into. And Minister Young, when he talked about what the government can do, I'll tell you, a lot of this is in the hands of the government right now. And we as advocates for change and what SOS is putting forward is not as complex as what Adam, Dwayne, and Norm have spoken about here. It's actually very focused. And what we need to focus on is, and Terry mentioned a little bit about this, is secure care, and this is where I'm coming from today, secure care for the people that have acute drug addiction, regardless of what that drug is, and people that have significant mental health issues such as schizophrenia. These are the unsheltered population. These are the people that are occupying your public spaces. These are the people that are shoplifting from your businesses, breaking your store windows, interfering with the customers that are coming to you. That has such a significant impact as you, and I think that's the reason why SOS was put together, because these businesses can't survive. I went over to buy a latte at Waves next door this morning, and the girl was telling me she's selling the business because it's that bad. That's where we can make a difference. And Terry, I'm sorry to say, and you're a good friend of mine, is we're not going to solve this overnight, but we need more than just words. We need actions. And I think that's the frustration we're feeling, whether we're blaming it on the lack of resources for our law enforcement entities that are out there, or whether we're talking about the capacities within our jail system to house these particular people, or the fact that we don't have appropriate bail reform. The fact remains, we need to do this. We don't have time to sit back because people are shutting their businesses down. And Adam was correct in saying it's not necessarily the statistics, it's the fear of crime out there.
Thank you very much for that. I think a lot of what I've heard here has to do with resources as well. So let's talk about that. That to what extent is recruiting and vacancies on police forces having an issue? And I think this time what we'll do is we'll start with you, Chief Palmer, and then come back this way. So what is the recruitment picture like for VPD, and is that challenging when you keep up with this resource challenge?
It is challenging. So Vancouver continues to be a destination police service. We have many new officers or people applying to be new recruit officers. We have many people applying from different police services locally and across the country. I'll tell you what the problem is, and I'm going to break this down to really simple concepts, because if it's predictable, it's preventable. And here's something that's predictable. If you don't have enough police officers, it's going to cause a problem in how we deploy on the street. We have a lot of people applying to VPD. The problem we have right now, and this is an advocacy thing with government, I will tell you, is that there are not enough seats at the police academy to fill the requirement of recruits in police departments in British Columbia. For Vancouver, for Surrey, for Delta, for New West, the RCMP is obviously separate because they train at RCMP Depot and Regina. But for municipal police in this province, we cannot get the volume of recruits in. It's not a problem recruiting them and hiring them. I can hire enough people to fill all of the academy seats, and all of my seats in the academy are full every single time, and I'm hiring lots of other officers from other agencies, but that creates vacancies in their agencies. Surrey takes from us, RCMP takes from us, we take from them. It's like shifting people in chairs. We did put a proposal in to the provincial government, who does have the authority for seats at the police academy at the Justice Institute. We did receive a letter back that there was going to be one-time funding of over $6 million and ongoing funding of over $3 million, not to VPD, but to the Provincial Police Academy, to accommodate the number of seats that are required for police recruits in BC. We haven't received that funding. If we receive that funding, we can get the flow through that we need to make sure we get the right number of cops on the street. So as far as recruiting, hiring them is easy. It's getting the training spaces to get the numbers that we need on the street on patrol.
It's pretty rare that I can see all the heads nodding in agreement on something like that. So could I get you to respond to that?
Yeah, thanks, Sammy. To Adam's point, interest in policing is probably at one of the all-time highs, and I've been a police officer for 30 years, all in here in British Columbia. So getting the interest is not the challenge. It's processing the number of recruits. So for the RCMP, we need a significant number of recruits across the country. Now, selfishly, in British Columbia, I'm very fortunate because, similar to Adam, we're a destination province for the RCMP. We have essentially 1/3 of the entire RCMP police here in British Columbia. Where we find challenges in terms of recruiting is we have some really nice destination areas to police, and then we have some really challenging areas that we police. And so to address, I would say, in fairness, the district for the RCMP in British Columbia is a challenging area to staff. For all kinds of reasons, you don't have in many communities the same level of housing or education opportunities or employment for spouse or partners or all the niceties that we have elsewhere. So what we've done and what we've found is that generally, and it's not really a surprise, but people that live in the north like to stay in the north. So we've targeted our recruiting now. If you're in northern British Columbia and you want to come back as a police officer in the RCMP to northern British Columbia, we'll let you know that before you even go to depot. We're fortunate that depot is full right now. We're pumping hundreds of recruits through every year. But we, like other police agencies with COVID, suffered in terms of not only a lack of interest, but a lack of ability to train. And we're coming out of that little valley right now, but it'll take us a couple of years to get back to where we should be in terms of recruiting.
Yes, thank you, Simi. We're the new kids on the block in Surrey, and as we build and Dwayne's people demobilize, we have a lot more recruiting to go. In fact, I need about 300 more police officers, and we do have applications. It's not an issue whether experienced officers or recruits, but if you look at the future of this province and the need of policing, and if you look at the ratio of police officer to 100,000 population, we will need a lot more in the future, given part of our discussion here today. And the question to the community is, what do you want your police officers to do? And a police agency, most of the budgets, it's probably the biggest part of a municipal budget is policing. And we're going to need a lot more working out there. I give you an example. When I go to New York and I see police officers standing around on corners, and that's reassurance policing. And there's a lot to be said. That's a different context, of course, and what they've been through. But when I go out to the community, it's very clear that I get the message that we'd like to see more of you in uniform, wherever that may be, downtown or on the soccer pitch with the kids, et cetera, et cetera. There is a demand, there is a requirement to have more police officers. That ratio of police officer to 100,000, we're going to have to increase that. The recruiting is coming forward, but to Adam's point, we need a standalone police academy to handle that load. And we've made recommendations to the province, and we continue that dialogue, but we do need more seats at the JIBC.
Yep, go ahead.
So I just wanted to add to that too, because apart from recruiting, we're talking about vacancies, and I think all of us in policing, what we are experiencing now is that police officers, and particularly when resources are limited, you're asking your available officers to take on more. But police officers, like the ones up here, are human. We break. We get injured, we suffer physical injuries, psychological injuries, and I think what you've seen over the last 10 years or so is a recognition of the impact that it has on individuals and the need for them to get help, get whole, and get back to work. So when there's pressure overall on the system, it does impact the health and wellness of officers, and that can have an impact on vacancy rates as well.
I just wanted to touch on an issue that Chief Lipinski brought up, and that had to do with visibility of police officers in the community. And I think, Chief Palmer, we heard this from some Gastown businesses recently as well, that an increased visibility of VPD officers on the street, they feel has made a real difference in terms of kind of pushing back with public safety. Have your officers heard that? And is there perhaps a move to do more of that?
Yes, I agree 100%. Like, high visibility policing does work. We've worked closely with the business community on many different projects. On Project Barcode, where we've arrested over 1,400 shoplifters in the city. Project Ataraxy in the downtown core in District 1 in front of the supervised injection site in the 1100 block of Seymour. We've got a current project that's working in the downtown east side and also Gastown. High visibility with officers, and it's getting great results. Like, we're seeing reductions in crime, we're seeing more weapons seized. seized, lots of drugs seized, just really good results and good feedback from the community, so it works. I will tell you that because of all the other stuff happening every day, like the demand for police services I mentioned earlier is extensive in the city, so while those projects are going on, those other 1,000 calls are still coming in, so we still have to deal with those. But we do have those projects going on in certain neighborhoods, and they get great results. But people have to realize when we're doing those projects, we deploy our officers based on science, based on call load, based on supply and demand. It's not willy-nilly. And when we do projects like that, sometimes there's overtime involved, sometimes there's extra expense to the city of Vancouver. We have to balance all of those different concerns, but we agree 100%. I've got over 60 officers that walk the beat in the downtown east side. And in that neighborhood and that type of policing, Chinatown, Gastown, downtown east side, parts of Strathcona, that type of policing works extremely well.
Commissioner McDonald, I mean, you do a lot of smaller communities, rural communities too. How visible and out of the cars can officers be in those communities?
In the smaller communities, it's challenging to be out of the car, but what you'll see is involvement in the community. So you may not have the same call volume that you have, but per capita per officer, you may have significant volume. But it's the engagement. What we hear in our community is we want to see the police officers in our schools. We want to see them at our sporting events. We want them involved coaching. And so it's that visibility that gives the community comfort. In many cases, particularly in smaller communities, everybody knows where the police live. And so they're on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so even though they may be off shift, they're still on duty. And the ability for the community to go and seek the police at any time is incredibly important to them. But I would also say, to Adam's point, we know, in policing writ large, we know how to fight crime, so to speak. And high visibility is an excellent deterrent. It's the sustainability of that becomes a challenge with resources. I see MLA Linda Hepner here, former Mayor Surrey, when they were addressing a lot of the systemic issues on 135A in Wally, they were incredibly supportive as a mayor and council to provide resources for police mental health outreach teams, where we put a portable police station right in the center of Wally to provide services similar to what Chief Palmer provides in the downtown east side, and made an incredible amount of difference. But it's the ability to sustain that becomes challenging.
Now, Chief Lipinski, you have both of those issues. A large amount of space, not as many officers as you'd like to have at this point, and a desire for more visibility. What do you do in Surrey?
Well, there's a couple of things, Simi. First of all, when you're talking about beat policing, police presence, I'm a fan of that because, as our panel has talked about, it works. We have to look at the call load, we have to look at the density, and have more people out there. In Surrey, as we know, the process is that I do the analysis, I make the recommendation to the police board takes the request, the financial request, to council. And speaking just for Surrey, we will need more police officers for the future years than we presently have, just looking at the trend lines on the crime as well as the disorder, but also the feedback from the community and police presence and police engagement. And it was touched on by Dwayne, school resource officers as well. I'm a fan of that. I think there's a lot to be said. It's not about enforcement, it's about mentorship of young people. I talked about young people earlier. We have to invest in our youth, look at upstream, and hopefully mitigate some of the issues or outcomes, bad outcomes, downstream.
I just want to go to one of our questions that we have here. So there was a recent SOS province-wide poll that was done, and many respondents said that they believe that insufficient policing was to blame for the current situation regarding crime and public safety. Poll says that they believe police are not doing enough to respond to addiction and mental health issues in their community. But what do you all think that people should know about this that might, change their opinion? I'm going to start with Cash on this one because, Councillor, you're in a bit of a unique position here, as in the policing situation, but you also know the demands of what the public feels about this.
Well, let me tell you, policing is very, very costly. Before I got into policing, every police chief asked for more resources. For the 32 years I spent in policing, more resources were called for. 30 years from now, we're going to be asking for more resources. And the point I want to make here is maybe we need to look look at those police reforms. Maybe we need to look at different models of policing. And, you know, I respect my colleagues here, but we do have disagreements and different points that we want to take. And I think that's what we need to start to examine. Is there another model of policing, whether it's a tiered system or built on a protective services model, that's going to address these crimes that are affecting the community? In Richmond, we have them. Vancouver has them. Prince George has them. Nanaimo has them. We all have these same problems, regardless of where we live. And it's these people that are occupying these public spaces that are causing, and most of them are committing low-level crimes because of the problems that they have. Those are the ones that, as Adam talks about, when he has people that are on the street corner in Gastown that are going to be deterred from it. But we can't have a police officer in every community on every corner that's going to prevent that crime. We need to look at a more cost-efficient and effective way we can do business. I hear the frustrations coming from the community in Richmond all the time. I heard it when I was in the most affluent community in West Vancouver, where people were frustrated from that. You're going to continue to hear that. We can't respond to all of that. It's impossible. We have to look at a different way of doing business that's going to meet the needs of what the community expects from their protective services.
Chief Palmer, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I'd love to. Not just responding to Cash, but just to your initial question. So I think we should all see the fascination, but also the irony in those stats you put out, because people's perception of the police doing enough with mental health and addiction. How did we get to a point in society where it's the police's responsibility to be the main people responsible for mental health and addiction? So this is going to go to my point about solutions. Cash touched on it as well, but I just want to get to let's really think about what we're talking about here. There's going to be people in our community that have got social issues, health issues, mental health, addiction, alcoholism, poverty, homelessness, whatever their root cause of their struggles are in society. All those things that we see all the time. There's going to be other people that are hardcore criminals that are really dangerous and people that we need to be protected from and get off our streets. Sometimes those populations are cross-pollinated, other times not. When we're talking about mental health and addictions, and I know the province is, dipping their toe in the water on this, and Cash has talked about it, but here's one thing we need to do. It's not just about putting more cops on the street and being more visible dealing with mental health and addiction. That's reactive. If we want to be proactive, we've got the population of people in our society that have severe mental health and addiction issues. And I'm not talking about the 20% of Canadians that will deal with a mental health issue during their lifetime, because that's all of us in this room. 20% of the people in this room will have a mental health issue in their life, and that's normal. It's like having heart disease or diabetes or kidney disease. That's just part of life as a Canadian, and that will happen to 20% of the people in this room. We all have people in our family or friends that we know that have had those types of issues. The vast majority of those people will never have contact with the police, vast majority, and that's over here. And then in the middle, you've got people that will have interactions with the police, and we do have those partnerships, and there's a whole vast variety of them with, CAR 87, CAR 67, all these ones have been mentioned, ACT, AOT, nurses in our comm centers. We do all that stuff. But at the far end of the scale, we have a small percentage, but it's a fairly large number of people that are severely mentally ill, many times cross-pollinated with an addiction issue, who are on a continuous chronic basis a danger to themselves and or a danger to the public. And we know who these people are because we deal with them all the time. And we can't keep having a revolving door where when they come in the criminal side of the system, they get kicked out, or when they come in the healthcare side of the system, there's not enough resources to get that person on a better path in life. Let's not wait till the cops have to deal with them waving a knife around. How did that person get to that stage? Let's deal with that person, back it up 6 months or a year, and if somebody is that severely addicted or mentally ill, this is where I agree with the idea of secure mandatory care. There's compassionate care. There's many other, names or labels we can put on it, but there's some people that are not safe for us or for themselves to be in community, and that's not a compassionate society. Well, that's not a safe society. We have a great model in this province called Redfish, but it's insufficient. There's only about 110 beds. We need probably 5, 6, 7 times that. I know that the province is doing some work with out at Alouette in Maple Ridge and at Surrey pretrial. They're very small numbers. It's going to be taking a tablespoon out of a bucket of water. We need government commitment to look at secure mandatory care and stop these people upstream from being a danger to themselves and others and having interactions with the police.
Thank you for that. So Commissioner McDonald, then, what do you want the public to know? And also, can the RCMP respond to challenges in changing how you police?
Well, I applaud Adam because I agree with everything he said. I think the challenges that we have is that, to Adam's point, we're dealing with the same high drivers over and over again. And we have no ability, whether they're in a state of victimization sometimes, whether it's mental health and addictions, or when their mental health and or addictions are driving their criminal behavior. The criminal system, to Adam's point, isn't handling them well. They're coming back into the community, and they only know one thing: they're going to commit crime. When you come across someone that's suffering from an advanced state of addiction and or mental health to the point where they're bent over double, they cannot take care of their daily needs, they are prone to victimization. We as the police have very limited options on what we can do with that person. We don't have, to Adam's point, compelled care, which I would advocate for, that we need to look at. And so when we can't deal with it, the public look to us as to why are we, the police, allowing mental health and addictions to take over our communities.
And do you think the public doesn't understand that? Do you?
I think the police are, we have some ownership in that space, but we don't own those issues, but we're highly visible. You know, I came here today in uniform purposefully because it's easy. Thanks. But the point is, if someone came in here and they wanted to find the cop in the room, here I am. And that's what it's like in our community. So if my neighbor's crossing the street and they have to step over someone that's incapacitated due to severe addiction, or they go around the corner and someone's yelling and screaming and gesturing in a threatening manner because they're in a high state of mental crisis, they're going to turn around and look to me as to what I'm doing with that. And I could address maybe the instance when it's occurring, but the long-term ability to address those issues is severely limited.
Now, Chief Lipinski, you're also, once again, in a little bit of a different situation, in that you are supposed to be a new model of policing. So what are you changing? What are you doing differently? And do you think the public understand the role that's going on?
I think my colleagues articulated it well. We need compassionate and voluntary care. Now, that sounds simple, but changing or refining the legislation, there's a little complexity to it because, as Mayor Krog had mentioned, you're taking people's rights away, but it can be done. And there's people in this room that I talk to that have a methodology on what to do that, and different levels and different assessment templates, et cetera. I think it's so crucial in order to reduce the harm to society that we have in voluntary care. And I think that's in our future. And when we're talking about mental health issues pertaining to Surrey, we've got a number of ideas that we will roll out in the near future of how that's going to work. But we are taking a lot of policing time in dealing with these issues. And I believe in community wellness, not just crime reduction, and I believe that policing should have that role at the table, but that role is expanding and will continue to expand unless we take some concrete actions as was discussed so far today.
Okay, I want to get to a couple of questions that we've had from our audience members here. And this is an important one. I think somebody has asked the question of why is it so challenging to address the top level of organized crime? And I think that's really relevant today as well, because a lot of what we see with the shoplifting and the rampant theft and all of that, we know there are organized groups behind some of that. We've seen that. So can we talk about some of the challenges in addressing that? And this time I'll start down at the end there, Chief Palmer. And then you, Cash. We'll get to Cash, yeah.
Okay, thanks. So I'm going to get to, if the three things you want to take away from what Palmer said today, the first one was the Justice Institute. We need the funding to get the right amount of recruits to the police academy. Number two was secure mandatory care. And now I'm going to talk about number three, because this relates to chronic offenders, repeat offenders, people that are continually coming into the justice system. If any of you ever have trouble sleeping, what I want you to do is get a copy of the Criminal Code of Canada and flip through section 515 of the Criminal Code, in particular 515 subsection 10, because that talks about, you hear all the time about bail reform, catch and release, revolving door of justice. That is the particular section of the Criminal Code that deals with those issues. And what I want you to do is have a look at that subsection and the things that have to be considered under law in Canada. You know, they have to make sure that the person is going to show up in court. That has to be a consideration. There's protection of victims and witnesses and the general public from that person. But there's also the administration of justice and confidence in the administration of justice by the public. These things are laid out in statute federally by our government. And those things, in my view, are not always considered adequately. So when we have people that are repeat violent offenders, I'm all for giving somebody a chance on bail. Like if I pick up somebody that's never had any, interactions with the police, first-time offender, second-time offender, all that kind of stuff, let's put them on, give them some conditions, and we'll give them a chance. When somebody has come into contact with VPD or the RCMP 40 or 50 times, and we know they're going to repeat offend again because they always do, why are we releasing that person back out? So we talked about the people that have mental health and addiction issues, severe end of the scale. Now let's focus on the people that have severe criminality issues that we're dealing with on a regular basis and look at some upstream ways that we can deal with that and not keep releasing them out into the community.
Councillor Heed, when you were the Solicitor General of the province, like obviously organized crime is something that came up in these organized groups. Like what are the challenges politically then in tackling this problem?
Well, first of all, resources are incredibly needed, whether it's forensic or some other level of resource. And this is where I point to my colleague here, Dwayne McDonald, because they are an organization that does a very good job when they have the resources to go after organized crime. And they are federally mandated to do that. And when I talk about police reform, when I talk about police mandates, let's make sure from a federal point of view that we give the RCMP the skills and resources and funds to go after these high-level organized crime. And I'm sure Dwayne will tell you how frustrated he is trying to get at these people. We seem to get the low-hanging fruit all the time, and I know the low-hanging fruit is the one that bothers you. When we talk about bail reform, we advocated to the federal government to change the bail reform, and they changed the bail reform. However, here we are in the administration of justice here in the province of British Columbia. The judges are not doing what they're supposed to under the changes to the Bail Reform Act. This is where the Attorney General, she should be in front of the judges, and, Mr. Opal may disagree with me on this, but, banging her fist on the table along with the Premier and said, you're in charge of the administration of justice here in British Columbia. You need to make sure that your judges are actually implementing the Bail Reform Act as Adam described. And if they argue the fact that we don't have spaces in our prisons, well, we have to say, our portable is good enough for our kids, but not good enough for these chronic offenders that are continually causing havoc in our communities. Let's really look at this and decide. So from an organized crime point of view, I'm going to give it to Dwayne because they are great at doing it, but they need the resources and the funds to do it.
I guess you don't need me.
So I'd say this. I would say, yes, the RCMP has an excellent ability to combat and tackle organized crime. I would say that, again, to a point I made earlier, BC is very unique in that we have an incredible system of integrated teams where interagency, police agency come together, whether it's CFSEU BC or we have secondments into federal policing investigative units targeting organized crime. The province of BC has made significant investments to enable us to do that as a multi-agency approach. But I think what's often lost is that the complexity of investigating organized crime is higher than it's ever been. When you look at technological advancements that we're dealing with, whether it's encryption, whether it's the dark web, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's Bitcoin, all of these things are challenging to investigate and they take time. When you couple that with the fact that the police have to play by the rules and the bad guys don't have to play by the rules, it becomes even more challenging. So simple things that can make investigations complex. You used to be able to find subscriber information on a phone with a call to, say, a service provider, or IP addresses. Now we require affidavits and warrants to go before a judge to get that simple, basic starting point. When you add on the disclosure responsibilities, so anytime the police catch a large criminal organization or go for prosecution, we basically hand over every technique and every ability that we used to catch them, and they learn from that. So it becomes challenging. These groups are international in scope. They are corporate. They are multifaceted. And when you have a successful investigation, it often takes years to reach prosecution. So when you look at the resources that are required to target organized crime, we, the police, collectively know how to do it. We're very good at it, but we're limited in scope to be able to address all the needs that we're facing.
Chief Lipinski, is this an issue you deal with in Surrey as well?
It's an emerging issue, and I am confident with our integrated teams. My comment is this, that when governments change legislation, obviously they don't necessarily look downstream of what's going to happen at the front end of policing. And most of the time it points to, if you're going to change legislation, there's an impact and we need more resources. And when you're talking about organized crime, when you're talking about fentanyl coming through various ways into this country, and that became a social issue, very complicated to wind it back or follow the source or cut off the source, then that takes a lot of resources.
I also want to ask each of you if you could pick a legislative change that a level of government could make that you think would make a difference in policing in your communities, what would that be? I'm going to start with Councillor Heed down at the end there.
And you already know what I'm going to say. Secure care. Secure care. Call it whatever you want. We're not looking at the old style Riverview where we just incapacitated these people. We want care where they're actually going to get treatment. So they're going to be put on that continuum, whether it's because of their drug addiction or whether it's because of the mental health crisis that they're facing. It's a continuum of care. And if we have politicians that have a longer vision than just their elected years, we can get there. The problem is we put one piece of the puzzle in place. We don't put all those other pieces that are necessary to get us out of the crisis that we're in right now.
Chief Palmer?
Yeah, I agree, and I'm just going to double down, and I will say on the secure mandatory care issue, there is a lot of work that can be done with the existing provisions. There is room to tweak it and improve that legislation, which is provincial legislation, but think about it. We have Redfish right now where we have 110 people seeking help at the old Riverview grounds in a brand new modern healthcare facility that's state of the art. It's not the old, out of a Jack Nicholson movie from the 1970s. It's modern healthcare for 2025. We're doing it now. Let's get more of it. So that's one piece. The other one is the bail provisions under the criminal code. And I really want to see, and I know some of that requires action from the federal government as well, but criminal law is administered provincially in the provincial court system. Aside from the Prosecution Service of Canada, it's almost all cases are administered locally here in our province. So the province does have a role in this, and I find sometimes we're all guilty of it. City, province, feds, everybody's doing this. It's somebody else's problem. We all got to take ownership of what our piece of the pie is, and that includes all the different levels of government. So secure mandatory care, bail provisions. We don't want people that are dangerous on our streets out there when we can be giving them either help in the mental health and addiction side or protecting society from these repeat violent offenders that we know we're going to victimize people as soon as we let them out.
Thank you. Commissioner McDonald?
So yes, 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 and yes to all my colleagues. I'll go maybe some more obscure. So we all know the challenges we're facing with fentanyl here, not only in Canada, but all over the world. One of the challenges we have from a law enforcement perspective is BC has become, as you saw in the Falkland Lab, kind of a starting point for large, sophisticated labs producing fentanyl. Some of the challenges of that are the precursor materials that are imported into the country. They're controlled under the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, but chemists have the ability to just change a small portion of that chemical equation, and what was once prohibited is now not prohibited or is legal to import. And so there's a lag in terms of identifying what the current chemicals are that are being used to produce these deadly substances and legislation to address and prohibit them. I think there's also areas where we can tighten the controls on import and export of those chemicals to give law enforcement the ability to stop them from coming in.
Thank you. Chief Lipinski?
Without a doubt, secure care and bail. But I also want to mention funding, and that has to do with additional resources, Crown, judges, courtrooms, all the way to mental health, addiction counseling, and so forth. And the last point I'll make, tying it all together, there has to be that interplay between the judiciary, law enforcement, and healthcare. And I think there should be a continuum. I think there should be some closer working relationships. We're doing better now than we have done in the past, but we continue to have a little bit of silos happening. We have to have a continuum of care for that individual with everybody around the table.
Well, I want to thank our panel today for this amazing job. I feel like we could have been here all day just talking to the four of you, but unfortunately we're all out of time. But thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day today.
Thank you very much, Simeon. Thanks for our panels. Did a great job. I knew that this would be a very interesting discussion. And thanks, Simeon. We see why your show is so popular.